Hello, and welcome to We Live for Saturday, your favorite college football podcast. Normally, I'm your co-host, Mike, but today I am just your host, Mike, as John is busy getting ready to go out and tour the land. So he's got that going on. I apologize for this podcast being out so late. I realize it is Friday, and we're only now getting you a preview pod. My personal and professional life have been crazy this week. Absolutely crazy. And I'm moving, not like to another place, but just a different place within the same, I'm going to still be here in the TC, but I am just moving a little bit where I'm going to be. So I'm in the process of doing that right now, or at least some of that right now. It's going to be a process over the next month here. Because my professional life is so crazy. So I apologize for this being out late. It won't happen again. We will get the review pod out on Sunday this week for sure. So I promise we will do that. And then the preview pod probably on Tuesday, Wednesday at the latest. So we will be back on track as far as that goes. It's a rainy day. Might as well have a weather update. It's kind of a rainy, ugly day in the cities. And of course, I have to move a bunch of stuff today in that weather, so that's appropriate. But yeah, it's gonna be kind of a chilly weekend across the Big Ten. I'm pretty excited about it. I do think that it generally benefits Minnesota at home when it's cold. I think that that's true of most teams. I think most teams who are acclimated for the cold, teams like Minnesota, Wisconsin, Iowa, Michigan State, teams who get a fair amount of cold, I think when they get it, it's often the opponent who may or may not be ready. Now, in this case for Minnesota, it's Michigan State, so they'll probably be fine. East Lansing gets plenty cold, so they probably won't have any trouble adjusting. But that can be a thing when you play, the California schools, when you play like Nebraska or Ohio State. It's just not the same kind of thing, really, what they deal with weather-wise. As to what we have here in the glorious upper Midwest. Also, this is going to be a bit of a short pod today. Again, personal, professional life, moving a bunch of stuff. So yeah, it's just kind of crazy, but that's okay. We'll give you much longer. I promise the review podcast. I'll either be really happy probably or pretty upset in the review podcast. This is sort of a big kind of season hangs on this game kind of week for the Golden Gophers. So either way, you'll get some high emotion from me on Sunday. It'll just be a matter of what kind. And then it might just be me. I got to check with John, see if he's available, but there might be a couple more he can't do. Once he's touring, as you know, at times you'll be stuck with me. We'll probably also do the guest host thing sometimes. That's always fun. I enjoy doing that and getting other people's perspectives onto the podcast. So I can reach out to a few of our former guest hosts. If there's anybody you really want to see who's been on the pod before and you want me to try to get them to guest host, let me know. I can check and at least, find out and see if they're available and interested in doing that. But you're not here for weather talk or to hear about my personal life, although some of you are interested, and I appreciate that. So let's talk ball. We've got just 6 Big Ten games this week. So it's a short pod, but there aren't that many games to go over. So let's jump right into it. All these games will be played on Saturday, November 1st. And first up, we have the 3-4 Penn State Nittany Lions going to Columbus to take on the undefeated 7-0, number 1 ranked team in the land, the Ohio State Buckeyes. This is an 11 a.m. game on Fox, a.k.a. this is the Fox Big Noon game. The line is Buckeyes by 18.5. So I bet you when Fox picked this game, because they do like a draft, the networks do, of games. When they picked this game in the preseason, they thought, oh man, this is it. Because Penn State was poised to make a run at a national title. Ohio State was coming off a national title and poised to make a run at trying to repeat. And this would be 2 titans, 2 top 5 maybe even top 3 ranked teams coming together, button heads, and seeing who comes out on top. We thought that was the game we were getting. Instead, it didn't go that way in Happy Valley this year. After a heartbreaking double overtime loss to Oregon, Penn State kind of just fell off the wagon, and they haven't really gotten back on. I mean, they lost the stunner to UCLA, 42-37. Defense did not show up, didn't get off the bus at the Rose Bowl. Just weren't there. That's on I blame Jim Knowles as much as anybody else. And then James Franklin somehow, some way, loses to a plucky Northwestern team, 22-21. And then James Franklin gets fired. I believe that was the timeline anyway. You can correct me if I'm wrong. And then James Franklin gets fired because, apparently having one bad season or 2 bad seasons in, what is it? He was there 13 years, just is unacceptable. I mean, I kind of get it, right? Because the talk was national title. James Franklin was doing nothing to dissuade that talk, said it was the best team he ever had, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So for them to not just have a bad season, but have a bad season when they thought they had things figured out and were going to dominate, that's what's weird. Now, the Buckeyes, well, let's stay with Penn State for a second. Penn State gets a bye, and now they come and they have to try to rally in the shoe. Penn State is still, and of course now Drew Aller's out for the year too, so they're on their backup quarterback, so that's rough. That said, Penn State still has a lot of talent on this team. I don't expect them to compete in this game, but I do wonder down the stretch, probably not going to beat Ohio State or Indiana. And then your stretch run is Sparty, Nebraska, Rutgers. At Sparty, sorry, host Nebraska, go to Rutgers. So this could be a game, though, where Penn State tries to find something. If Penn State can, they're not going to beat Ohio State, I don't think. I mean, Ohio State is an unbelievable juggernaut. It's one of the best college football defenses I've ever seen in my entire lifetime of watching college football. Just from the D-line to the linebackers to Caleb Downs just running the whole show in the back end. I mean, they are absolutely phenomenal. And, Matt Patricia deserves a lot of credit for how well he's done with them, even though I don't think Matt Patricia is necessarily a good dude. He is obviously a great football coach, and he's got them playing at just an unbelievable level right now. So I think it's going to be hard with a backup quarterback for, Penn State was having their issues offensively anyway before Drew Aller got hurt. I just don't think they're going to be able to score. I think Penn State's team over under is 10.5. I just heard that listening to a podcast. I'm not, I think gambling is problematic for society. It's not that I have anything against anybody who does it. I just think it's hurting society as a whole and is a problem that we're not addressing and we're not regulating it very well. And it's a problem. I think it's damaging people. But I do think that the people who study those things know ball. A lot of them. Not always. Vegas doesn't always know ball because they're trying to maximize profits more than they're trying to accurately predict games. So people forget that sometimes, I think. But the 10.5 seems fair. Ohio State has, just bludgeoned their opponents this year defensively. I mean, it's been absolutely an absolute clinic. I mean, Texas, 7 points. Grambling, 0 points. Getting to conference play. Washington, 6 points. Minnesota, 3 points. Illinois, 16. That was the high mark. Wisconsin, 0. So Illinois is since conference play, Illinois is the only team all season that has scored double-digit points against the Buckeyes. Only team all season. I don't think Penn State's going to get there. I think Penn State has between 6 and 9 points tops in this game. And I could see them only getting 3. That wouldn't surprise me either. Although I do think it's possible that the Buckeyes get so far ahead that they put in the backups, and maybe the backups aren't quite as stingy as the starters, but they have been, is the thing, in these blowouts. The Buckeye backups have played well when they've gotten time. So they're really functioning at a high level. You know, I continue to think Ohio State is the best team in the country. And I just believe this is going to be biblical. And I think Ryan Day knows that Penn State still feels like a big game to the players, even though, and he can make them feel like it's a big game, even though Penn State's not having the year they expected. So I think the only thing going in Penn State's favor is that this is an 11 a.m. Central kick. That's it. That's the advantage they have in this game. Otherwise, I think all the laurels rest with the Buckeyes. So I'm going to say that Ohio State really goes for style points here. I'm going to say the Ohio State Buckeyes 45, the Penn State Nittany Lions 6. That's how I think it's going to go. Maybe I'm wrong. All right, moving on. We have the 4-4 Rutgers Scarlet Knights heading to Champaign to take on the 5-3 Illinois Illini. This is an 11 a.m. game on NBC. Interesting. NBC getting into the early block. They don't always do that. And the line is Illinois by 13.5. Things have kind of fallen off for Rutgers and Greg Schiano after a really nice start to the year. You know, they started out 3-0, offense clicking, defense being a problem, and the defense has just been a problem in conference play. I mean, let's be real. They gave up 31 points because Iowa scored on, I believe, defense against them, or maybe special teams, I forget. So they gave up 31 points to Iowa, 31 points to Minnesota, 38 points to Washington, 56 points to Oregon. And then they played a little better they gutted out a win last week. They got some momentum going back in their direction, which I think is so important at this time of year. At any time of year, really, momentum is big. I know PJ Fleck doesn't think momentum exists. It exists. It's real. Sorry. And even if the scientifically are going to tell me, you're going to tell me that like it doesn't make that big a difference, I can tell you that the way you feel, it makes a difference. Momentum impacts how you feel. And that's a powerful thing, impacting how people feel. So Rutgers managed to gut out a win with a last second field goal against Purdue, you know, in what was a really good game. And that was that. They forced a turnover when they needed to force a turnover, got the job done. I just think that a 2-touchdown game feels about right, because Rutgers is very good. Athan is very good. You know, Strong is great at receiver. And, you know, they can score points. And I think they will score points tomorrow, even against a pretty good Illinois defense. But that Rob Smith defense can't stop anybody. Can't stop anybody. And you got a quarterback in Luke Altmaier who's been playing at a pretty high level all season for Illinois. So you've got something to match Athan there. And I just think Illinois is more dynamic. I think they have more ways they can hurt you. Hank Beatty, man, he's great. He's great for Illinois at wide receiver. And I just think that this is going to be a big Hank Beatty game. That's what I'm calling for. Calling for him to have a big game, for Illinois to flex a little bit. I think it's going to be kind of a back and forth shootout, but back and forth with Illinois consistently ahead by 1 to 2 scores. So I think ultimately what we have is like 38-27 or 24. We'll say 38-24 Illini. I think that'd be fair. I think that's a reasonable take for what this game is going to be. I'm excited to watch it, like, for sure. It's on at 11 o'clock. It'll be. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to have Ohio State, Penn State on the main TV until it gets ugly, which could be mid first quarter. And then I'm going to have Rutgers, Illinois on the other TV. But at some point, I may switch the two of them, depending. All right. Next up, we have the number 2 ranked Indiana Hoosiers heading to College Park. Sorry, number 2 ranked 8-0 Indiana Hoosiers heading to College Park to take on the 4-3 Maryland Terrapins. The line is Indiana by 21.5. Whoo. That's a lot of points. Maryland, it's been a Mike Locksley season. In September, they were great. They rolled through non-conference, had a little bit of a stumble, not great performance against NIU, but otherwise blew teams out. And then that first conference game, they crushed Wisconsin. And that was before we knew how bad Wisconsin was. Crushed Wisconsin, ran them off the field. Things were looking up. Then they had a bye week. And then they were up at one point 20-0 against Washington. And they let Washington come all the way back and beat them 24-20. They had Nebraska on the ropes, man. They had them. The Terps had them. They were about to just, go ham. And, Nebraska executed late, escapes with a win, 34-31. Then last game, UCLA. The offense just had diminishing returns, and you lose 20-17. And frankly, if a Mike Locksley defense holds a team to 20 points, then Mike Locksley has to win that game, because your whole thing is your offense. The offense is your baby, and that passing game is your baby. And putting up 17 points, I know it was on the road. I know it's hard to go on those time zone games out to UCLA and play. But that was a game Maryland needed to win. They needed to win it. They needed to have it. Because I don't think they're going to be able to touch Indiana with a 10-foot pole. I don't. And then you look forward. They've got at Rutgers. Okay. That's a potential win, but it's on the road. Then you've got at Illinois. And then you host Michigan, and then you have Sparty. So Maryland still has winnable games. Other than the Michigan game, they should have a shot, and the Indiana game tomorrow. They should have a shot. They're going to have 3 chances to win 2 games. Unless they shock the world tomorrow. Which, I don't know. Indiana is having a once-in-a-lifetime kind of run right now. I mean, it's really something to watch. It's really impressive. Curt Cignetti has done a fantastic job, and he has just found players who weren't rated that highly, but who are just fantastic college football players despite their lack of blue chip status. I mean, Fernando Mendoza completing 73% of his passes at about 2,000 yards already for the season, almost 9.5 yards per attempt, 24 TDs, 3 interceptions. Only been sacked 6 times on the year. Roman Hemby, Kalon Black, both having decent years running the ball. And then, the focal point of the offense, the man, the myth, the legend, your hero if you're an you're an Indiana fan, Elijah Surratt. Elijah Surratt, man, that guy is something else. He's fantastic. I'd say after Jeremiah Smith, it is my belief that the next 2 best receivers in this league are Elijah Surratt and Denzel Boston. Apologies to Carnell Tate, who's also great. And I'm sure there are other guys I'm leaving off there too. But Elijah Surratt is he's special. And just enjoy him, Indiana fans, because I have a feeling next year on Sundays, he's going to be doing what he's been doing the last couple of years here on Saturdays. Just absolutely torching anybody who tries to cover him. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter what you do. And you know what? If it's a contested ball, he's going to go win that too. But he gets separation. He's big. He's fast. He's physical. You know, he's a really impressive, 6'2", all that kind of stuff. Really impressive athlete. Already has 10 touchdowns on the year, which as a wide receiver is fantastic. And then you got Omar Cooper on the other side, who quietly has 583 yards on 15 yards per catch with 7 touchdowns. 7. EJ Williams, he can play a little bit too, And the running backs, they will throw to. It's just really impressive the way Indiana has it rolling offensively right now. So I could wax poetic about the Hoosiers for a long time because they're the second best team in the country. And I truly believe that, and that they are going to give Ohio State everything it can handle in that Big Ten title game. That'll be unbelievable. But until then, they got to take care of business. And next up is Maryland. It's a road game. I think that's the only thing really I've got in Maryland's favor. Obviously, I do like Malik Washington for Maryland, but I just think this Indiana defense is playing at a high level right now. I know Aiden Fisher was maybe banged up, so it'll be interesting to see if he plays or not. I think that makes a difference. He's a special player. And yeah, I've got the Indiana, Kurt Cignetti knows he needs style points to keep that top ranking. And so he's going to keep blowing out teams if he can. That's just what he's going to do. So I've got the Indiana Hoosiers 45, the Maryland Terrapins 24. And it's going to feel empty. I think Maryland scores twice when the game is still relatively close. And then, their other scores come in garbage time when, Indiana's pulled its starters and all that kind of stuff. All right. Next up, we have the 3-5 Michigan State Spartans heading to Dinkytown, coming to the bank to play against the 5-3 Minnesota Golden Gophers. This is a 2:30 p.m. game on the Big Ten Network. Love being on the Big Ten Network. Always get good coverage, good commentary, especially now that they got rid of, I don't think Matt Millen does games for them anymore. Or if he does, I haven't seen him in a while. So now that they have, serious guys in the booth who aren't just bloviating hacks like Matt Millen was, it's really great. I love being on the Big Ten Network. I think those games are fun. The line is Minnesota by 3.5, which I think it opened at 4.5 or 5. So the line has slightly moved in Michigan State's direction. My guess is that's because of the rumor out of Dinkytown that star Minnesota running back Darius Taylor looks like he won't be playing. And he's the best player on the offense. Full stop. So he's only played in 3 games this year. Essentially, he got hurt on the first carry against Iowa, so I don't count that. And he got hurt on the first drive against Northwestern State, so I don't really count that. He's essentially played 3 games this year, and he's been hurt the rest of the time. That's been really frustrating and really hard to deal with for a Minnesota offense that has a deficiency on the offensive line. The Gophers are not great up front. There's one guy, and these guys get paid a lot of money. Marshall is just not very good. He's just not good enough. He's not Big Ten quality. Marcellus Marshall. So that's been a problem. When you got a guy who's, there's only so much you can do to hide somebody who just is not up to caliber. So that's made it harder to run the ball. And not having Darius now is going to make it that much harder to run the ball. So I think the Gophers are going to have to throw to win tomorrow if they're going to. And then you got Michigan State. Michigan State's in a really interesting spot. They have had quite a slide after a good start to the year. They won, but even in the games they won, their defense showed vulnerabilities. Like Youngstown State gave up 24 points. They beat Boston College, but it was 42-40. And then, you've seen that carry on into conference play where they haven't won a game. They gave up 45 points to USC. They gave up 38 points to Nebraska. They gave up 38 points to UCLA. They gave up 38 points. Wow, a lot of 38 points to Indiana. And they gave up 31 points to Michigan. It's not what you think of when you think of like a vintage Joe Rossi defense, like at all. So, sorry about that. All right. So, not a vintage Joe Rossi defense. Sparty has been really struggled. I thought they played hard against Michigan. It was in the rain, which helped their defensive effort. But they played pretty hard, and they made a couple plays. And if they hadn't had, they had sort of an unfair play where like the defensive end timed the snap perfectly, but they called him offsides. And so instead of Michigan was deep in Michigan State territory, instead of Michigan State recovering a fumble and taking the momentum, Michigan goes in a couple plays later and scores a touchdown. So Michigan was going to win the game anyway, but that was a bad break for them. But this Joe Rossi defense, they struggle to get pressure on the quarterback. That's been something they've struggled with since he got there. And they just aren't very sound. They don't tackle particularly well. Their secondary can be had. So if Minnesota is going to play a game without Darius Taylor, Michigan State's probably a good team to play against. Because they have a fair amount of defensive vulnerabilities which is, it is just, people forget it's only year 2 for Jonathan Smith. So he's done his best to build through the, high school recruiting in the portal, but they just kind of aren't there yet. My guess is they'll be a better team next year than they are this year, assuming he keeps his job. I know people are talking about him potentially getting fired, which you got to stop firing coaches after 2 years. Like, occasionally it makes sense. When Ryan Walters went 1-11 and clearly had no idea what the F he was doing, like, I understand that. Why Purdue pulled the plug as soon as they did. But Jonathan Smith, and he was a first-time head coach too. Same with Deshaun Foster at UCLA. First-time head coach, in over his head. Like, I kind of get it. Jonathan Smith has had a lot of success. He had a lot of success at Oregon State. I think you have to give him a third year and see if he can turn it around. But I get why the fans are getting antsy. I even saw a particularly famous former Spartan who is a famous former basketball, or not a Spartan alum who's a famous former basketball player, say that it was not fun to watch Michigan State football. And it hasn't been that much. And I get that. I think these are two teams that are desperate for a win. I think the Joe Rossi revenge factor is interesting because, publicly PJ is going to say Joe Rossi's a great guy, blah, 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 blah. But in that locker room, he's saying, hey, Joe Rossi thought he was better than you. He thought he was better than you. He thought he could be better in East Lansing than he was in Minneapolis. And how's that turning out? Not so good. So I think Minnesota is going to want to play their best ball, and especially coming off the beating they got last week at Iowa's hands on the road, which, Minnesota's just been a much better team at home than they have been on the road. They're a young team, so it makes sense, especially at like some of the key positions. So it makes sense that you kind of have those big emotional swings, and they're going to need to, because sounds like Darius Taylor's out, sounds like John Nestor's probably out, and fingers crossed on Jalen Smith, who also, who they need Jalen Smith at wide receiver. They need Jalen Smith to be okay in the play. That's important for Minnesota going forward. If they're going to, Minnesota's still 4 games left, 5-3. They're probably not going to win in Autzen, but they've got home games against Northwestern and Wisconsin, which they will be favored in. And home game against Wisconsin, and Michigan State, which they are favored in, which will be favored in, and also a neutral site game at Wrigley Field against Northwestern, where, truth be told, there'll probably be more Gopher fans realistically than there will be probably Cats fans, or, if it's not a big majority, it'll be close. So that'll feel very neutral sitey. So Minnesota doesn't really have to play another true road game that they need to win. Yes, would I love it if the Gophers walked into Autzen and beat the Ducks? Yeah, that'd be great. But I'm not predicting it to happen. I'm predicting Minnesota's going to lose that game. That said, Minnesota can still get 3 more wins, and then if you win your bowl game, you still won 9 games. It's not the way I think many Minnesota fans have had it. But you know what? I'm tired of so many Gopher fans. Like, I drove 10 hours round trip for that Iowa game. It was demoralizing, right? I get that. But, like, these Gopher fans act like the season's over. We got a month of football left. We got a third of the season left, plus the postseason. So, assuming you win one of these next 4 games, but I'm assuming that, plus the postseason. So you have a lot of football left to be played. And there's a lot of things the team can accomplish. And I hope if you're out there, you're listening, get your butt to Huntington Bank Stadium tomorrow and watch the Gophers. It's a great time. It's always fun. And yeah, I think, get out there. It should be a really interesting matchup. It should be a hard-fought game, and it's a game that the Gophers need to win. So going to need that crowd. I think this game's kind of ugly, honestly. I think without Darius Taylor, that takes away some of Minnesota's dynamism. So I think that ultimately this is a game where the Gophers win, but I end up thinking I wish they had won by more. I have got the Minnesota Golden Gophers 28, the Michigan State Spartans 20. And I hope the Gophers play better than that. I hope they prove me wrong. Minnesota's been either way above or way below expectations in kind of every game. Bill Connolly talked about that in his SP Plus, that they've been a really hard team to get a beat on because they're just, I think, again, because they're a young team and they've had some key injuries. So they're just very different. They've just been very different week to week in what you see from them. So after the debacle in Iowa City, hoping for a big bounce back performance. All right, moving right along. We have the 2-6 Purdue Boilermakers going to Ann Arbor to take on the number 21 ranked 6-2 Michigan Wolverines. This is a 6 p.m. game on the Big Ten Network. The line is Michigan by 21.5. Purdue needed to win that game last week against Rutgers. They needed to win that game. They had them. They had the ball. It was tied. You're thinking worst case overtime, best case we win. They fumble. Rutgers gets it. They kick a field goal. Game gets yanked out from under you like a cartoon, like a rug pull. Like someone just walking along and they step on and they just pull the carpet. Pull that rug. And then all of a sudden, you're on your butt. So that's kind of what happened to Purdue last week. They are at 2-6, riding a significant 6-game losing streak. And they've kind of, at times they've been competitive. They looked pretty good against Minnesota. They looked okay against Illinois, but they just did not get off and they looked good against Rutgers, but they didn't get off the bus against Northwestern. I mean, they just didn't show up for that game at all. So which Purdue are you going to get? I think after an emotional loss in a big night game, I think Purdue comes out with some piss and vinegar in the first quarter, but I think that dissipates quickly because this Michigan Wolverines team is on a mission. They really are. And at 6-2, they're not out of the playoff hunt yet. Not in their minds. Absolutely not. They've got, you look at their remaining games. They have Purdue at Northwestern, at Maryland, then they host Ohio State. So they should beat Purdue. They will be favored against Northwestern and Maryland, even on the road. They'll be significant favorites. And then so you assume that you win those games. Then you have to pull another upset. And if you upset Ohio State, then you're into the playoff at 10-2. And not just the playoff. You could be getting into the Big Ten title game potentially, depending on how things shake out everywhere else, to play against Indiana. So, that's going to be big. I think Michigan is poised to make a run here. Sharon Moore knows he's not coaching for his job per se. He's not going to get fired this year, but he doesn't want to be on a hot seat going into next year. And I think you get to 9 wins. You get to 9 or 10. If you get 10 wins to get the playoff, great, awesome. Everything's perfect. I think you get to 9 wins, win your bowl game, get to 10 wins, say we almost made the playoff. We're going to come back next year and we're going to do it. We're going to get there. So I think Michigan is set up well, just going forward. But in this game against Purdue tomorrow, I mean, there's a reason why Michigan is larger than larger than a 3-touchdown underdog. So I think this one gets ugly. I think it gets out of hand. I think it's something like Michigan doesn't put up a bajillion points because just the way they play stylistically, but it's going to feel really dominating. So I've got the Michigan Wolverines 41, the Purdue Boilermakers 7. Yeah, 7. I think that's reasonable. All right, last up, we have the number 23 ranked USC Trojans at 5-2, heading to Lincoln to take on the 6-2 Nebraska Cornhuskers. This is a 6:30 p.m. game on NBC, the Here Comes Saturday Night game. And the line is USC by 4.5. I also realized earlier when I said the Indiana-Maryland game on CBS, I forgot to say cue the horns. So I'm going to say cue the horns now for that game. But back to USC-Nebraska, the Here Comes Saturday Night game. Lincoln Riley's been really bad on the road. He's been really bad on the road ever since he got to USC. Not just in the Big Ten either. He was bad on the road when he was coaching in the Pac-12, when the road schedules weren't as difficult as they are in the Big Ten. So he's really struggled on the road. I think that's something to watch. It's not a body clock game because 6:30 Central Time is 4:30 Pacific. So there shouldn't be an advantage body clock wise at all for Nebraska. So I think that's good for USC. And, Nebraska, they bounce back. They got absolutely demolished by the Golden Gophers. I mean, just crushed. But, they bounced back from that and they gutted out a win. They didn't play great, but they gutted out a win against Northwestern last week. Here's the thing. I think Nebraska's a better team at home. I think Dylan Raiola can definitely do some things. There's no question about it. And, if they can run the ball a little bit, then they could make this a game. But USC has Jaden Mayava playing at an unbelievably high level, completing 68% of his passes, just doing fantastic work. And they have, a killer run game. They've been running the ball really well this year for almost 6 yards a carry as a team, almost 1,500 yards so far as a team, or over 1,400 anyway. And to complement that electric passing game. And sorry, when I was listing my top receivers in the Big Ten, and I said Jeremiah Smith, Elijah Surratt, and Denzel Boston, I forgot to include Mekhi Lemon of USC because he is special. I mean, 758 yards receiving already, nearly 16 yards per catch, 6 touchdowns. And then you got Jacoby Lane on the other side and Lake McCree at tight end. These guys are all playmakers. They can all get it done. And Jaden Mayava is doing a great job getting them the ball. I think the difference in this game is that Nebraska can't stop the run very well. They're kind of undersized up front, and they get pushed around on the defensive line. And I think if Lincoln Riley is smart. He will lean on that run game tomorrow and then use that to open up the passing game. Because Nebraska's secondary is pretty good. If you just try to throw it on them, I mean, you're going to have some success. USC has the weapons to do that, but I don't know if you're going to have the same kind of success as if you pound them, run the ball at them, right at them, and then throw the ball. So Lincoln Riley, once again, I am challenging you to rely on your run game more than you think you need to. All right? And I think they do that. Now, from Nebraska's angle, they need this game. I mean, they said they wanted to make a playoff run. Their next 2 games, they'll be favored at UCLA, at Penn State. And then they end the year hosting the Iowa Hawkeyes, who are playing unbelievably good ball right now. So that could be that Iowa-Nebraska game. If Nebraska beats USC, that Iowa-Nebraska game will be for a playoff spot, potentially, against that. That could be really interesting. But I don't think that's going to happen, because I think USC is just, I think that offense is too good to be slowed down by this Nebraska defense, especially if USC is willing to run the actual football. So, yeah, that's how I think that goes. So I have the USC Trojans 31. USC Trojans 31. The Nebraska Cornhuskers 20. I think it's a goodish game for a while. I think eventually USC's talent shows out, and I think they play better than they have up to this point on the road. I think this is a game where Lincoln Riley needs it, because he needs it. USC at 5-2 is still clinging to playoff hopes. They are. And if they get by Nebraska, then it's, can you beat, you're going to beat Northwestern, you're going to beat UCLA, probably. It's, can you beat Iowa? Can you win at Autzen? So a lot of playoff implications here. There are going to be teams eliminated from the playoff race today, and other teams are going to, cement their spots to be contenders into late November. I'm excited to see who's who. All right. I think I'm going to call it. So thank you, everyone, for listening to the pod. Sorry it was so belated this week. Also, sorry to our audio listeners. I know there were a couple weeks the pods didn't upload the way they were supposed to. So I didn't mean to leave you hanging, our audio-only listeners. So shout out to you. And then to everyone, we'll have the review pod out on Sunday, and then the preview pod next Tuesday or Wednesday. So look out for that stuff. And everyone have a great weekend of football. Good luck, as long as, I hope your team wins, unless you're, Michigan State. In which case, I hope your team goes down in flames. But I hope it's a good, clean game and nobody gets hurt. All right. Have an awesome time, and I will see you in the next one.